I buried my husband on a rainy Tuesday. People whispered condolences, brought flowers, and lied with their eyes. I smiled through it all until his sister stood up, holding a baby and a folded document. "He left this revised will," she said, "and this child is his." The room turned. Eyes shifted. The silence was louder than the storm outside. But the next morning I found a USB in my mailbox. No sender. Just one message inside. "The truth isn't in the will." That's when I stopped grieving. That's when I started digging, and I realized I might have been married to a stranger. The chapel smelled like lilies and polished oak. I stood beside Andrew's closed casket, dressed in a tailored black suit that made grief look elegant. People approached in small waves, offering condolences wrapped in hollow words. "He was a good man. You two were perfect together. Such a tragedy, so young." I nodded, thanked them, and moved on. I had practiced this mask for days. The composed widow, neither too broken nor too cold. But beneath the tailored silk and soft words, something itched at the edge of my perception. Too many glances exchanged behind my back. Too many conversations that stopped when I walked by. Even Andrew's mother, Evelyn, barely looked at me. Her handshake was limp, her eyes unreadable. She used to call me my daughter in front of guests. Today she said nothing. Then Vanessa arrived, late as always, carrying a baby. The room stilled. Even the storm outside seemed to hush. Vanessa, Andrew's older sister, had never been maternal. She was a shark in pearls, a high-profile attorney who never had time for brunch, let alone children. But there she was, clutching a blue-eyed baby in a navy onesie and making her way to the pulpit. I frowned. This wasn't part of the program. I had worked with the funeral director myself. There were to be no speeches beyond the pastor's. Vanessa adjusted the mic, cleared her throat, and began. "Thank you all for being here to honor my brother," she said, voice steady. "He was a man of strength, vision, and complexity. In the final months of his life, Andrew made some decisions he never had the chance to share publicly." She looked directly at me, her lips curved, not into a smile, but a challenge. "This," she said, lifting the baby slightly, "is his son." A collective gasp, then whispers rippling, multiplying, bouncing off marble walls. I stood frozen, blinking. No, she was lying. She had to be. Vanessa continued, calm as a news anchor. Andrew made updates to his estate, knowing his time might be limited. With his passing, it's only fair that the revised will be acknowledged. She unfolded a document, crisp and fresh. In this updated version, dated 3 months ago, the majority of Andrew's assets, including the penthouse, the trust fund, and controlling shares in Dawson Innovations, are to be held in trust for his son, Liam. As Andrew's legal representative, I am executing this as of today. My heart knocked hard against my ribs. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came. I scanned the crowd. No one met my gaze. Not even Evelyn, who stood stoic beside her chair, lips pursed in silent approval. I walked out before the final prayer. Rain slapped my face as I pushed open the chapel doors. I didn't care. Let it soak through the silk. Let the makeup smear. I needed air, space, something real to hold on to because inside everything was slipping. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the living room floor of the penthouse I apparently no longer owned, surrounded by condolence cards and unanswered questions. Andrew had never mentioned a child. We were trying, unsuccessfully, for one. I had been charting cycles, whispering dreams of nurseries, and all that time he was fathering a baby with his sister? No, there was no world where that made sense. Vanessa hated him as much as she hated me, unless it wasn't hate, unless it was something else. I didn't finish that thought. The doorbell rang at 2:13 a.m. I froze. Who the hell? I looked through the peephole. No one. Then I noticed it. A brown parcel on the floor, no return address, no markings. just a single sticker on top, neatly typed, "The truth isn't in the will." My fingers trembled as I picked it up and brought it inside. Inside, there was no letter, no explanation, just a black USB drive. For 5 minutes, I stared at it on the counter, trying to decide if I was being pranked. Then I plugged it into my laptop. One file, MP4, timestamp 2 months ago. I clicked play. Andrew appeared on screen, seated in a sleek office I didn't recognize. He looked tired, not sick, just hunted. Beside him sat a man in a gray suit who I recognized after a moment, not our estate lawyer. This man was Julian Haas, a corporate counsel we'd met briefly during a merger. Andrew leaned forward. "If anything happens to me," he said to the camera, "this recording is to be used as legal intent. The updated will being handled by Vanessa Dawson is not my final directive. It was never notarized by me, and the signature was extracted under duress. This man," he gestured to Julian, "has the legitimate document. I've also secured a private trust and asset list that will only be activated under specific conditions." He exhaled, rubbed his temples. "I didn't want Claire to know about any of this. Not yet, but if she's watching this, then it means I failed to stop them." The video ended. I stared at the black screen. My pulse thudded loud in my ears. Failed to stop them? Them. How many people were in on this, and what the hell had Andrew gotten himself into? 2 days after I watched the video, I found the vault. It was hidden inside the wall of Andrew's old study, now my office, a place he rarely let me into after our 3rd year of marriage. I'd always thought it was just his space, the way some people need a sanctuary, but now I knew better. He hadn't needed a sanctuary, he'd needed a fortress. Behind a panel of built-in bookshelves, I discovered a small keypad embedded into the wood. It looked like part of the security wiring, subtle enough to be dismissed unless you were searching for it. I keyed in the date of our wedding. Nothing. Then I tried his mother's birthday. Still nothing. Then I remembered something odd he used to say when we fought. There are only 2 dates that matter. He never clarified which dates, just said it like a riddle. I thought he meant birth and death. But something about the video, it made me think again. I entered the day we met, then the day he proposed. The light blinked green. A soft click followed. Inside was a fireproof lockbox and a single envelope taped to the interior wall. My name was written across it. I opened the envelope first. No letter, just 2 folded documents. The first, a handwritten will, initialed on each page, signed and dated 6 months ago. In it, Andrew left everything, assets, equity, properties to me. No mention of any child, no mention of Vanessa, no charitable trusts. The second document made my blood run cold. A divorce agreement, unfiled, unsigned by me, but fully completed by Andrew. It had been drafted 2 months ago, 1 month before his supposed updated will. It outlined terms of separation, a 60-40 asset split in my favor, and an NDA clause forbidding public discussion. So which was the truth? Had he meant to leave everything to me, or sever ties entirely? The contradiction splintered something inside me. I didn't know which hurt more. The idea that he'd planned to leave, or that he might have changed his mind and been stopped before he could. He'd said in the video he wanted to protect me. But protect me from what? From who? That night, I poured a glass of whiskey, his favorite Glenlivet, and sat at the kitchen island trying to piece it all together. My memories kept flickering backward, like flipping through a corrupted photo album. And suddenly, I started noticing things I'd missed. Andrew always took photos of our contracts, rental agreements, NDAs, even invoices from contractors. I used to laugh at it. "Are you archiving our entire life?" I once teased. He said, "Paper lies. Images don't." I went to his cloud drive. I'd never been the type to snoop before. But grief changes you. Grief layered with betrayal turns you surgical. I found folders marked archive, buried inside subfolders titled with fake project names. And there, I found it. a PDF of monthly wire transfers, $25,000 each, to an entity named Evelyn Foundation for Reform. It was a nonprofit registered to his mother's name. The transfer history stretched back 2 years. I dug deeper. Public records showed the Evelyn Foundation had no employees, no offices, no annual reports, but it held over $4 million in assets. A shell. Andrew had been funding a ghost charity run by his mother, quietly, steadily. For what? The math made no sense. We had shared expenses. If he was moving that kind of money, I would have noticed. Unless it wasn't from our accounts. I checked our joint statements. Nothing. Then I logged into the business accounts of Dawson Innovations. My access still hadn't been revoked. And there it was, a side account marked Strategic Allocations. Withdrawals matched the transfers to Evelyn's foundation. He was siphoning company money. And Vanessa? She'd been the one drafting all company legal memos for the past year. They weren't just pushing me out of the inheritance. They were erasing me from the company I helped build. And Andrew, my husband, my partner, had helped them do it. For what? A baby that might not be his? Guilt? Leverage? Or had I never really known him? The betrayal wasn't just about the will anymore. It wasn't about the baby, or the funeral, or even the staged spectacle of it all. It was about control. They thought I'd go quietly, that I'd mourn and vanish and leave them the empire they'd meticulously redirected while I focused on love and loyalty. But grief makes you dangerous. I went into my files and pulled up an old pitch deck, Claire 1.0, the original blueprint of my own real estate tech venture, before Andrew suggested we build something together. He'd convinced me to fold my idea into Dawson Innovations, promised we'd be equals. I looked at the documents now and realized I'd made a mistake. I gave him access to everything, my code, my pitch, my vision, and now they were carving me out of it like I'd never existed. That wouldn't happen again. By dawn, I had reactivated my old domain name, called my former CTO, and scheduled a meeting with an angel investor who'd once told me, if you ever go solo, call me first. They wanted me to disappear, but I'd learned something from Andrew. Paper lies, but code doesn't. And now I had nothing left to lose. The launch went live on a Tuesday morning. The new feature, an AI-driven fraud detection layer built into property databases, was the exact tool real estate platforms were too afraid to touch. It identified anomalies in title histories, shell corporation chains, and flagged inconsistent ownership transfers. I had written most of the back end myself over sleepless weeks, fueled by grief and caffeine. The tool went public under my newly revived company, Archive. The feedback was instant. Investors called, emails flooded in. But what I didn't expect was the panic it caused in one particular corner of the city. By Friday morning, 6 luxury properties in Manhattan were flagged as high-risk holdings in the Archive beta. All of them had been purchased through a nonprofit umbrella linked to Evelyn Dawson. Within 24 hours, 3 media outlets had picked it up. A tweet thread went viral. The Evelyn Foundation, long paraded as a force for urban renewal, was now under suspicion for laundering assets through layered LLCs and trusts. And the woman who'd looked through me at her son's funeral suddenly remembered my name. I got the legal notice at 4:17 p.m. that Friday, certified, hand-delivered, and smugly stapled together by a junior partner from Vanessa's firm. It accused Archive of defamation, abuse of proprietary data, and deliberate reputational sabotage. It demanded a full takedown of the flagged listings and a public apology. I laughed. They wanted to sue me for building something too effective. Evelyn didn't even realize I hadn't targeted her. She'd just gotten caught in the web. Still, the lawsuit was clever. It wasn't about winning in court. It was about delay, distraction, legal warfare, a way to bleed my focus, my time, my money. But I had learned to think like Andrew. I called a friend, Jackie, an ex-prosecutor who now specialized in anti-corruption litigation. She took one look at the flagged assets and said, "They're not even hiding it well." I handed over the entire Archive data set. "Burn them down," I told her. While Jackie built her case, I returned to another mystery, the will Vanessa had presented at the funeral. I'd let it sit for weeks, too stunned at the betrayal to fully examine its bones. But now, I was ready to dissect it. There was something too clean about it. No smudges, no watermarks. The formatting was off from Andrew's usual templates. His signature, identical to older documents to the pixel. I suspected it had been lifted and replicated, but it wasn't just the signature. I traced the document history via metadata recovery tools. The file originated from Vanessa's laptop, not Andrew's. The final version was saved 4 hours after the time of death listed on his certificate. She hadn't just faked a will, she'd post-dated it, badly. I needed a second opinion. I reached out to Julian Haas, the attorney in the USB video. He agreed to meet me at a quiet cafe in Brooklyn, far from the Dawson family radius. He looked older than I remembered, tired, cautious. "I figured you'd come eventually," he said, sipping his espresso. "Andrew always knew you were smarter than they gave you credit for." Did he say that? Didn't have to. He trusted you with the vault, didn't he? He told me Andrew had approached him 6 months ago, expressing concerns about internal manipulation. Andrew suspected Vanessa was planning something, with Evelyn's quiet support. He'd asked Julian to prepare contingency documents and to hold them privately until triggered by death or disappearance. Why didn't he confront them? Julian shook his head. "You don't confront people like Vanessa and Evelyn. You build an escape hatch, you leave a trail, and you pick someone you believe won't blink when things get ugly. He picked me." He did. There was one final piece, Julian added, an encrypted email. Andrew had scheduled it through a delayed server release tied to biometric verification, his retina scan. But the secondary access had been tied to me. He handed me a drive. "You have 48 hours to open it before the key expires." When I got home, I sat in the dark for a long time before plugging it in. The file sat there, waiting. A single line glowed on the screen. "Don't trust what they say I wanted. Trust what I left for you to find." The encryption cracked just before sunrise. The email opened into a plain text document. No header, no logo, just Andrew's words. No punctuation flourishes, no legalese, just stripped honesty. "If you're reading this, Claire, it means I didn't make it. And if I didn't make it, it's because I got too close. I wanted to tell you, but you were safer not knowing. Vanessa found out I was planning to revise everything, divest from the foundation, freeze Evelyn's accounts, start clean. She said if I tried to walk away, she'd ruin you, not sue, not threaten, kill." I stopped reading. The words blurred. My lungs forgot their rhythm. He had known. About the laundering, about the fake will, about everything. And yet, he'd said nothing. Had he been protecting me or saving himself? I read on. "I signed the divorce agreement thinking it was the only way to shield you from what was coming, but I couldn't go through with it. You were the only part of this life I didn't regret. I created a conditional clause with Julian. If I died unnaturally, full control of Dawson Innovations, including the architecture IP, the fintech patents, and all startup assets, transfers to you. Attached was a digital contract, time-stamped, notarized by Julian with Andrew's biometric signature, enforceable under New York corporate law. The trigger clause read, "In the event of death by means other than natural causes or certified terminal illness, the asset transfer is irrevocable." Andrew had written himself an escape route, and in doing so, handed me the matchbook to burn their house down. I made 3 calls, first to Jackie, the prosecutor turned firebrand. I sent her the clause and asked one question. "Can this overturn the will Vanessa filed?" She answered in seconds. "Easily, especially if the assets in question exceed those listed in the public will. We just need to prove the death was sudden, not expected. Autopsy ruled it an accident. Then let's make that our opening shot." My second call was to a forensic audit firm that specialized in family wealth obfuscation. Not the usual CPA crowd, these people wore gloves when opening boxes. I gave them full access to every trace of Evelyn's foundation, all the flagged listings, and Andrew's transfer history. My third call was to the board of Dawson Innovations. Some of them had liked me. Some had merely tolerated me. But none of them wanted the PR disaster of a brewing inheritance scandal layered over money laundering. I reminded them that Andrew's final corporate directive gave me controlling interest. Then I told them I planned to take it. The next week moved like chess. The auditors uncovered offshore transfers Vanessa had routed through 3 dormant LLCs tied to shell addresses in Delaware. They found Evelyn had withdrawn $800,000 in cash across 27 transactions, just under the reporting limit. They traced fraudulent asset assignments, including a Hamptons property signed over to a family friend in exchange for consulting services that never existed. When the reports went public, the IRS pounced, freezing accounts, issuing subpoenas. Evelyn's face vanished from every gala invite within 24 hours. Vanessa, cornered and bleeding politically, tried to fire back with an injunction to halt my claim of controlling interest, but she underestimated the clause. Andrew had baked in one final trap. The contract was tied not just to Dawson Innovations, but to Archive, the new entity I built. Andrew had quietly invested in it under an alias months before he died. That made Archive a legal subsidiary under his corporate trust, meaning everything they tried to cut me out of, I already owned. I walked into the boardroom that Friday morning in a fitted black suit, not mourning, not grieving, ready. I'm not here to ask for my seat back, I told them. I'm here to remove the rot. You have a choice. Stand with a crumbling legacy or build something cleaner. By unanimous vote, they handed me the chair. By the time dusk fell, Vanessa and Evelyn were under investigation. All accounts frozen, all assets seized. The penthouse was mine again, but this time I walked into it alone, no longer pretending it meant anything. I stood by the window, wine glass untouched, and stared at the skyline. They had tried to erase me, but Andrew's final words kept echoing, "Don't trust what they say I wanted, trust what I left for you to find." Victory was quieter than I expected. There was no confetti, no slow-motion applause, just spreadsheets, legal documents, and the scent of dust settling after war. I stood at the helm of an empire Andrew helped build and tried not to feel like I had inherited a mausoleum. People congratulated me, called me brave. Headlines praised my resilience, my intelligence, my execution. But none of them asked how I slept. The truth was, I didn't. The night after I reclaimed the company, I stared at the ceiling until sunrise, not from adrenaline, but emptiness. I had dismantled a dynasty. I had exposed lies, dismantled fraud, and reclaimed my power. But in doing so, I had also shattered the last illusion I clung to, that Andrew, for all his secrets, had truly loved me. Love, it turned out, had fine print. One afternoon, a journalist emailed me, a quiet name from an independent outlet. The subject line was, off the record, child allegation. I didn't want to open it. I did anyway. He'd been digging through Andrew's sealed records. What he found was a paternity case filed 8 years ago by a woman named Elise Vance. The court ruled in Andrew's favor. No child support required, but Elise had given birth, a boy. The baby died 5 months later from complications. No press, no obituary, just a line in a coroner's file. The journalist asked, "Did you know?" I didn't reply. Instead, I drove 2 hours to a cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The grave was tiny, a simple stone, Benjamin Vance. Loved briefly, missed always. I stood there, hands numb, wondering how many lives Andrew had lived without me, how many truths he'd compartmentalized to keep his image intact, how much of our marriage was a performance to himself. And then I cried, not just for the baby I never had, but for the version of Andrew I'd loved, who might never have existed. That night, I pulled every photo off my walls, every framed memory. I packed them in boxes and labeled them archive, as if the past could be filed away like paperwork. But the past doesn't disappear. Vanessa resurfaced. Despite the financial sanctions, the legal heat, the public disgrace, she found a camera and a microphone. She sat down for an exclusive interview with a cable network and made her pitch. Claire Dawson was a tech manipulator, a media strategist who used grief to launch a vendetta. She weaponized her startup to destroy a family, Vanessa said, tears perfectly timed. She's not a widow, she's a tactician. The clip went viral. Hashtags emerged. Some supported me, some didn't. The internet doesn't need truth, it just needs friction. Then the messages started. At first, they were anonymous comments on my company's forums. Watch your back. We know where you live. You're not untouchable. Then they escalated. Emails, voicemails. My assistant intercepted a package with no return address. Inside was a shredded copy of the archive contract and a dead crow. The police filed it as harassment, advised me to vary my routines. But I knew this wasn't random. This was personal. They had lost the war in public, but someone was starting a new one in the shadows. One night, I returned home from a late meeting. The doorman handed me a small envelope. "No name," he said, shrugging. Inside was a photograph. Me, asleep in my bed. The window behind me cracked slightly open. I froze. The timestamp was last night. My apartment was on the 32nd floor. Whoever took the photo had been inside. I called the police. Again. They swept the apartment. No prints, no signs of forced entry, just one sentence left in handwriting on the back of the photo. "You took everything. Now watch what I take." I didn't sleep that night either. I sat in the center of the penthouse, lights on, a knife in one hand and my phone in the other. No one came, just silence and the low hum of the city below. But I understood something I hadn't before. Power doesn't protect you. It paints a target. And I had just become the most visible woman in the room. I could have destroyed her. The evidence was airtight. Vanessa's forged documents, Evelyn's hidden accounts, even the photograph left in my apartment, crossed the line between intimidation and criminal intent. Prosecutors were ready. All they needed was my go-ahead. But somewhere between grief and rage, something inside me broke loose. Not a scream, not vengeance, just silence. The kind that comes after you've stared too long into the abyss and realized you don't want to become it. I declined the charges. In a press conference the next morning, I stood at the podium, not as the widow of Andrew Dawson, not as the CEO of Archive, but as a woman tired of war. I told the truth about the forged will, the coercion, the financial schemes, Andrew's silent attempts at redemption, my own blindness, how I ignored signs, enabled illusions, and let love become denial. I named no names, offered no accusations. I simply laid the map, and then I unveiled the Widow Protocol, Widow, a nonprofit legal initiative for women caught in inheritance disputes, financial coercion, or postmarital manipulation. The mission was simple. Give them what I didn't have. A defense before the damage. I poured my share of Andrew's trust into it, sold off the penthouse, closed every Dawson account still in my name. I'm not building a legacy, I told the press. I'm ending a cycle. Some called it brave. Some called it guilt. I didn't care. I wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. That night, back at my office, an old email appeared in my inbox. It was from Julian. Subject, scheduled release, final directive. I clicked. One line. Thank you for surviving them. No signature, no attachments, just the full weight of everything we had endured, wrapped in 8 words. I stared at it for hours. Then I archived it, not to forget, but to remember, without reopening the wound. 6 months later, I left New York. No press release. No farewell party. I packed a suitcase, turned off my phone, and boarded a one-way flight to a coastal town in southern Spain where no one knew my name. I found a small white house on a hill overlooking the sea. The walls were uneven, the windows creaked, but the silence was clean. I planted herbs, adopted a rescue dog, and watched the world turn without needing to spin inside it. Archive grew without me. The board appointed new leadership. Investors poured in. It became a unicorn within a year, featured in Forbes and TechCrunch. I didn't return. I didn't Zoom. I didn't explain. I simply let go. Every few weeks, someone found me anyway. An email, a letter, a knock on the digital door. I replied only when I felt something more than fear. Resonance. Then one morning, nearly a year after I left, I heard a knock at my real door. I opened it to find a girl, early 20s, backpack slung low, eyes raw from travel. She didn't introduce herself, just handed me a folded envelope. My mom said to give this to you. She passed away last week. She said you'd know why it mattered. I stepped aside and let her in. Later, when she was asleep on the couch with my dog curled against her legs, I opened the letter. It was handwritten, smudged in places. Claire, you don't know me, but your foundation helped me when my ex-husband tried to steal everything. Our house, our child, my voice. Your lawyer fought for me. Your words kept me sane. I wanted to die, more than once. But then I heard your interview. You said, no victory is clean, but silence is always a loss. So I stayed alive, for my daughter. And now she's safe, because of you. Because of you, I lived. I sat on the steps of my little white house until the sun came up, the letter clenched in my fist like a lifeline. They had tried to take everything. But in the end, I became something they never saw coming. A survivor who didn't just endure, she transcended.